Before Michael Meyers stalked the streets, before Jaws shut down the beach, before Alien burst onto the scene, another terror captivated the world, shocking audiences till they screamed, puked, and passed out.
Oh my God, I've never seen anything like it.
My legs are just going, yeah.
Man, that is one of the most grossest movies in the world.
She turned her head around.
And it keeps getting funnier every single time I see it!
That's right, we're talking about 1973's The Exorcist, based on the 1971 novel of the same name.
Today we're going to dive into the relationship between two masters of terror to find out how their push and pull resulted in a film that's retained its bite for decades.
There were certain things that I would at this time call minor disagreements. He would say, Billy, you've cut the heart and soul out of the movie. And I would say, Bill, you're a sore winner.
If it's possible to spoil a 50-year-old movie, now's your chance to escape. Otherwise, get your crucifix and your barf bag because the power of Christ compels us to ask, what's the difference? Originally a comedic writer, William Peter Blatty penned both the best-selling novel and the script, winning the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay.
The inspiration for the novel stemmed from a 1949 event that happened while Blatty was a student at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., the same town he set the book and movie. A real-life exorcism of a young boy by Jesuit priest William S. Bodern. Blatty's research was intensive and included a collaboration with an actual priest. It is in the book's honest realism that the true horror is communicated. When Blatty shopped the idea for a movie, all the studios passed, fearing the controversial and grotesque subject matter.
They were just afraid. I wasn't sure there was a movie in it.
The book's continued undeniable popularity eroded that fear with the promise of huge box office returns, and so Warner Brothers signed a deal with Blatty producing and gave him director approval.
I thought, this needs an honest director that is agnostic on the subject and can give this incredible story such a sense of documentary reality. I wanted Billy Friedkin.
Warner Brothers, however, had bigger names in mind: Stanley Kubrick, Arthur Penn, and Mike Nichols.
You're trying to seduce me.
Blatty fought with them over his preference for Friedkin, even threatening to call them out on Johnny Carson. The studio narrowly avoided public shaming, giving in to Blatty's demands after a screening of The French Connection, which Friedkin had premiered that year.
And they said, well, Bill, we've seen The French Connection, and now we want him more than you do.
Although Blatty and Friedkin's rapport was friendly and professional, it wasn't without its tensions. When he gave Friedkin his first draft, the director didn't mince words.
I thought it was not very good. I thought that it was filled with a lot of symbolism and underlined, and it wasn't the novel.
Friedkin revisited his copy of the source material with a filmmaker's eye and marked up the pages, prioritizing the visual and emotional impact the movie could convey by distilling or altering certain elements from the book.
Every night, he would reread the novel, and he'd make these notes, and he'd come in and he said, I think we ought to start with this scene, and go to that scene and that scene. And we went through the whole book that way.
You know, I love to talk film, discuss, to critique.
The Exorcist is pretty damn faithful, if you'll pardon the pun.
Oh, it burns!
When Reagan, the 12-year-old daughter of actress Chris McNeil, begins to exhibit bizarre and frightening behavior, Chris seeks medical and psychological help.
The temporal lobe, it's up here in the lateral part of the brain.
However, Reagan's condition worsens, exhibiting signs of demon possession. Desperate, Chris turns to Father Damien Karras, a troubled priest grappling with a crisis of faith. Convinced of the girl's possession, Karras teams up with Father Merritt, an experienced exorcist, to confront the demonic entity, battling not just for Reagan's soul, but for their own faith and sanity. All that stuff happens in both the book and the movie.
The power of Christ compels you!
William Blatty struggled with the first page of the novel. He would write and rewrite an opening with mysterious rapping sounds at the McNeil home. With a trash bin full of crumpled paper, he eventually decided the place to start was with Father Merrin at an archaeological dig in northern Iraq.
The film, however, takes the opposite approach, starting instead with the shot of the Georgetown house at night. It's a quiet evening as passers-by walk arm in arm and a statue of the Virgin Mary stands silent, eyes closed. The imagery is mundane yet foreboding. Then the film quickly shifts to Iraq, drenched in blazing sunlight. The visual juxtaposition of the dark night of the previous scene sets up a battle between good and evil. The Iraq sequence progresses with very little dialogue, communicating the impending horrors with impeccable sound effects by Gonzalo Gavira. The anvil hits like alarm bells. the craftsman's carving like the sound of a ticking clock, further accentuated by the following shot of an actual ticking clock. Much of what you see and hear in the Iraq sequence is without explanation. The strange trinket, the St. Joseph medallion, the large statue that Marin stares down much like in a Western. The film is telling you horrors are ahead and that this man will play an important role, but the details are unknown.
The book, meanwhile, shares much more with the reader. We are told the figurine is of Pazuzu, the demon of the southwestern wind and disease. It's also alluded Marin had dealt with the demon before, a past conflict that left him weakened with a heart condition. This pays off by the end when Marin suffers a heart attack, much to the dismay of Pazuzu, who, not ready to miss out on the chance to defeat Marin spiritually, begs Father Karras to resuscitate him. It's like sad, twisted, and spooky.
The specific knowledge of Pazuzu and his history with Father Marin is absent from the film. When Marin dies, a possessed Regan revels in his death.
You son of a bitch!
Throughout the film, detailed backstories like Marin and Pazuzu are left up for the viewer to extrapolate. Furthermore, the movie merely touches on the satanic worship ritual known as Black Mass. The book, however, describes in vulgar detail just how the Black Mass rituals defile and mock Christian liturgical practices. The film replaces all those details with a single, striking image that effectively communicates the nefarious vandalism at the local parish.
Good morning, madam.
Good morning, Carl.
The film also forgoes the details of the personal lives of Chris's employees. Both Carl and his wife Willie, who have a marriage tainted by the memory of a daughter Willie believes to be dead. Carl, however, turns out to be hiding the fact that she is alive, but in an abusive relationship and strung out on heroin. It's a dark secret that the demon uses to tease and torture Carl throughout the novel.
In the book, Carl's secret comings and goings makes him a prime suspect in Lieutenant Kinderman's investigation into the death of film director Burke Dennings.
Well, you know this director was doing the film here.
The plot of the homicide investigation is pared down in the film, featuring only the essential conversations with Chris and Father Karras, completely dropping Kinderman's research into the Black Masses and tense interrogation of Carl.
Would you like to ask him?
No, never mind. It's very remote.
The most impactful condensing that occurred during the adaptation was the timeline. The book takes place over months, while the film's events occur over a matter of weeks. Because the novel's timeline is longer, the horrors of a prolonged search for a diagnosis is on full display. As Regan's condition slowly grows more and more inexplicable, the medical theories become more and more fringe. By the time the controversial theory of dissociative identity disorder is broached, Chris has already seen the occult-like side of the medical world, further blurring the line between measurable reality and the paranormal.
The movie, however, deals not in blurred lines but in clear and direct signs of otherworldly phenomena, thanks to groundbreaking mechanical effects by Marcel Brucateur. Everything from the Ouija planchette moving independently to the full-on levitation above the bed, the film cranks up the intensity of these events from the book to a dramatic level. Book Regan doesn't levitate, and most of the furniture is moved while she's alone. Even the iconic head turn is described as unnatural, but Chris is so exhausted she may have misinterpreted what she had seen. But Friedkin knew his job was to bring the horror into a visual space that the audiences would believe. And that brings us to the crux of this adaptation: doubt.
Doubt plays in the themes of both the book and the film. Father Karras doubts his faith when confronted with a miserable world and empty spiritual promises.
I'm a Catholic.
Conversely, Chris, an agnostic, begins to doubt the power of medicine, and in her desperation, a new spiritual belief rears its head.
You tell me you know for a fact that an exorcism wouldn't do any good. You tell me that!
Meanwhile, both the movie audience and the reader finds themselves in a position to confront their own beliefs. The difference is, the film is rigged. Cinematically speaking, it's just more thrilling to watch a spiritual battle unfold on the screen. The adaptation exaggerates the poltergeist phenomena from the book and drops many of the scientific explanations for Regan's condition. The most influential evidence dropped from the novel, however, is that of a book on witchcraft.
In the novel, the doctors posit Regan's condition to be an extreme case of hysteria brought on by the stress of her parents' divorce, mixed with depression and a deep knowledge of demonology. What perhaps began as a cry for attention festered into a psychological break as Reagan believed in her pantomime so strongly that her mind and body manifested true symptoms of possession. That brings us to the book on witchcraft, gifted to Chris by a party guest named Mary Jo Perrin, a character also absent from the film.
In the book, Mary Jo Perrin is a self-purported psychic. When Reagan gives Mary the psychic Willie, she gives Chris the book containing details about possession as an implication of Reagan's possible inhabitant. The servant Willie finds the book hidden under Reagan's bed, which lends itself to the theory of hysteria, brought on in part by the symptoms Reagan read from the book.
Without the inclusion of this book, the film pushes the paranormal explanation. Between that and the over-the-top supernatural events that play out on screen, one would be hard-pressed to logic this demon away.
While the book acknowledges the contagious nature of hysteria with documented cases of priests believing that they had themselves been possessed by the exorcised demon, the movie does not. And this has a profound effect on the conclusion.
Unlike the novel, which maintains its ambiguity through evidence contradicting true possession, the movie declares the possession to be supernatural as Father Karras goads the demon into leaving Reagan and possessing him. We see his face change to the putrid state of a possession just before the priest grapples for control, long enough to leap out the window, ending his life and defeating the devil. There's no denying the validity of the supernatural here.
The book describes Karras' final moments with the demon from the perspective of Chris hearing the sounds of the struggle from downstairs. Without any visual descriptions, there's no conclusive evidence of a psychological break or a supernatural possession. It's left up to the reader to interpret.
In the final scenes, Father Dyer performs last rites for Karras and bids farewell to the McNeils, both moments pulled directly from the book. He then takes a moment at the top of the stairs where his friend fell to his death, before leaving to the iconic sounds of Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells.
Conversely, the book closes on a final upbeat moment between Father Dyer and Lieutenant Kinderman. In the book, Kinderman invites Dyer to a movie, echoing the relationship he formed with Karras. He quotes Casablanca, saying, "I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship." It's a touching moment that had been shot, but was ultimately cut from the film, much to the chagrin of Blatty.
This relationship that Karras had with Kinderman lives now through Father Dyer. And everything, God's in his heaven, all is right with the world.
However, in 2000, Friedkin included this final moment in a restored director's cut of the film.
I think what we should probably do with this new version is have you come on at the end and say to the audience, this film's not a downer, folks. This is not a downer.
I'm ready.
Ironically, most of the differences between the director's cut and the theatrical cut revolve around scenes that Blatty complained about losing in the original edit. In a way, one could argue that the revised version is, in actuality, the author's cut.
As I got older, I become somewhat less arrogant, and I felt that he should have the version of the film come out that he wanted.
At the top of Blatty's list of complaints was the exclusion of a conversation between Karras and Marin about the demon's motivation in possessing a random 12-year-old girl.
Why this girl? What is the sense of the point of that?
I think the point is to make us despair, to see ourselves as animal and ugly.
I felt that that statement of what it's all about was inherent in the whole film.
And anything that stated it suddenly became like we were trying to teach the audience a lesson, which I think is the difference between your approach and mine. And I think if the film is successful, it's where your approach and mine both end and meet.
It also has a dramatic function, I think, Bill, and it's this. It allows the audience to not despise itself for loving all of that shock. They can enjoy the film for what it is and not revile themselves for enjoying it. Does that make any sense?
Indeed it does.
Like Kinderman and Karras trading disagreements and bonding over cinema, Friedkin and Blatty bore a friendship out of the grueling task of producing a genre-defining film. It's messy work, but by God, they did it.
It destroyed my comedy writing career, needless to say.
And while Blatty's book invites the reader to weigh the balanced evidence of science versus the paranormal, Friedkin thrills his audience with the decidedly supernatural adaptation through the masterful use of cinematic language.
The Exorcist gives you one possible explanation of why bad things happen to good people. It also says there is a very thin line between good and evil, which is in all of us.
And that's the story of this adaptation. Where do you fall on the debate over Reagan's condition? And what do you think of the remastered version of the film? Sound off in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of adaptations right here on Cinefix.